Okay, we are live. Gonna let the room warm up here for a minute, and we're gonna take a look at a quick market update for the charts here. January 30th, 2026. We have Bitcoin after pulling back to the $84,000 level right at this moment. And the question to ask right now, I think, is are we going to see some bearish movement to the downside, or are we going to get a bit of a recovery here back up towards the high 80s or $90,000? Now, if I'm looking at the chart right now on the daily, we've obviously broken below this long-term trend line. If I zoom out to a weekly, again, this long-term trend line for Bitcoin going all the way back to the end of 2023, I would like to see us try get back up and close this week's candle above this level. We still have to wait more than 2 days until the close of that weekly candle. So I think we're going to have to wait until Sunday evening to find out the ultimate direction of what happens with Bitcoin. But if we look at the critical levels of support here on the chart, that uptrend remaining intact since the end of 2023 is very important. But if we bring up the EMAs, we've also just broken below that 100-week exponential moving average. And so when we broke below the 50-week EMA back here in the middle of November, that was a signal that we were going to come substantially lower. And indeed, when we broke below that 50-week, we came 20% further for the price of Bitcoin, breaking from $100,000 down to that $80,000 level. And now just on today's daily candle, if we zoom back in to the daily chart and remove those EMAs just for a minute, we can see how we have wicked down to retest that $80,000 level, getting a little bit of a bounce here and moving back up over the past few hours above $84,000. But like I said, I think the critical level to get a better insight on is with the close of this weekly candle, when we get it on Sunday evening, are we going to have continuation here to the downside, as is the case if Bitcoin was to close here around $83,000, $84,000, or are we going to get price moving back up, reclaiming that long-term trend line and getting us back into safety? Because as it stands, that 100-week exponential moving average, we are losing it, and that might mean having to come lower before going higher. Now, that next critical level after, let's say, the $80,000 level is going to be this long-term trend line as well, which lines up with cycle peak back in 2021 and this area of resistance from March 24, which turned into support when we came to retest it at the end of March 2025. And so that's going to be the next obvious level of support if we lose that 100-week exponential moving average, and that would not be the best scenario. If we zoom back to the last cycle, you can see that the 100-week EMA did serve as a really nice level of support here at the beginning of 2022. Like, yes, we lost the 50-week in the first week of January, but we did have that 100-week holding for 7 to 9 weeks before we broke down. We're actually getting something similar here, where we're having that 100-week holding as support here for the past couple of months since that drawdown in the middle of November. And if we're to lose that, you would have to think we'd need to come a little bit lower here before getting a move higher. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. 2 days plus is a long time in Bitcoin and crypto. And so we're going to have to wait and see what happens here. But this longer term structure of support that goes all the way back to the previous cycle highs will still remain intact and allow Bitcoin to test that 70 to 75K level, where we did indeed wick down to in April of 2025. So I think that's the critical level to watch here for Bitcoin as we move into the weekend. But obviously, with Bitcoin pulling back here into the mid to low 80s, we're seeing many of the other alts getting smashed downwards on a percentage basis. You're looking at Ethereum losing this key support around that $2,800 level. Again, zooming in here to the daily, we're going to have to wait and see if Ethereum can make up some ground here in the final 3 hours of this daily candle. Otherwise, we're going to have a close below that $2,800 area for the first time since the summer of last year. And so that would not be ideal, because if we close below that, we're likely to have to come just a little bit lower here as well. Now, what's really happened across the board here, if we look at precious metals, gold and silver have had a huge red candle on the daily here over the past 24 hours. Gold coming down from highs at 5,500 to 4,800 as of right now. On a percentage basis, that swing over the past 24 hours, that's a 13% swing for gold. And it had an even higher swing of 15% if we go to the lows on this wick at 4,600. Now, I'm interested to see, is this the local top? Because historically speaking, when we've entered those periods of consolidation for gold, after those local tops, you can see this period of consolidation here from April through until August of 2025. This was the time period where Bitcoin was ultimately able to rip much higher. Gold had a phenomenal Q1 from the beginning of 2025, right from the 1st of January. We started at $2,600, and that run up from the 1st of January up until these highs in the first week or two of April was a 33% move for gold. If we compare that to what Bitcoin did, if I bring up the BTC chart in a new pane here, we can clearly see that that exact same period where gold had a 33% run up in price was the same period where Bitcoin was drawing down by about the same percentage. Bitcoin had a 30% drawdown here during that exact same period in Q1 of 2025. But notice what happened when gold began to move into its distribution phase and consolidate here for the next few months. Right around that second week in April, we reached a local high and entered consolidation. And right at that time period, when gold entered that consolidation period, you can see that was when Bitcoin found its bottom in the first week of April and went on to do a 60% run to the upside here as gold began to consolidate. And so maybe it is not the worst thing in the world for Bitcoin and crypto here if gold and silver are finding a local peak and they're about to enter a phase or a period of sideways consolidation. Just to draw another very quick example here, if we zoom out even further on the chart and we go back all the way to middle of 2020, you can see that gold had a phenomenal run up here right until this local high in August of 2020. And once again, it entered a distribution or consolidation phase for that period into Q4 of 2020 and then all throughout 2021. Again, what happened with Bitcoin and crypto during this phase, end of 2020 into 2021? Well, once again, let's bring up the BTC chart in a new pane on the weekly. You can see once again here, right as gold was reaching that local high, that was when Bitcoin started to just prepare for this phenomenal rally into the end of 2020 and all throughout that first half of 2021. You can see that right during that period when gold hit its local high, began to drop and consolidate, we had a phenomenal run up here from September 2020 until April, May of 2021. We obviously had a second leg up then for Bitcoin, but the point I'm making is that if we are indeed seeing a local high for gold and silver across the board here, maybe, and it's not going to be something that happens tomorrow or over the weekend, but maybe as we move into more of a distribution or consolidation phase for gold and silver, if these local highs are coming in here, then we might have an exciting few months for Bitcoin and crypto at some point here in 2026. And I know, you have all the 4-year cycle people talking about the fact that we got this 126K peak back in October. And yes, that is valid. Of course, we did get that peak back in October. And that does align with the traditional 4-year cycle of getting, the market peak in Q4 of the post-halving year. But what we didn't get was we didn't get a green year for Bitcoin. And again, I'm going to bring up the Bitstamp chart here just to illustrate this point because we have more price data from a historical standpoint. We zoom back out to a 12-month chart here. This will tell us everything we need to know. But ultimately, when you're looking at Bitcoin's price on the yearly candles, 2021 and 2017 respectively being very large green candles. This is representative of the fact that you had phenomenal price action to the upside, Bitcoin reaching all-time highs, and then obviously moving into a bear market the year after. Now, that trend was similar up until obviously the peak of Bitcoin getting to 126K, but traditionally speaking, according to the 4-year cycle, if 2025 was meant to be the same as 2021 and 2017 respectively, then we should have had a substantially in the green candle for calendar year 2025 on this candle. And that did not happen. So that does have me cautiously optimistic about what could be before us here for Bitcoin and price action across the board in crypto in 2026. Of course, you have to read it for what it is and not blindly look at being a perpetual bull, which I do like to be sometimes. But ultimately, when you're looking at this price action, we are getting rejected from this long-term trend. We had a breakdown on the daily here, move up to retest, got a break to the downside. All eyes on the weekly candle here over the next few days as we move towards Sunday evening. And obviously, I'm not going to ignore what the chart and the technicals are telling me. It does look like we might have a little bit lower to go before going higher, according to this particular chart. So let's wait and see what happens. We are still respecting a longer term channel here until Sunday, and we will wait and see what happens with the close of this week's candle. The other chart, maybe the final thing that we can look at here before we close out this live session, if there's anyone watching, if you want me to take a look at any specific charts, just drop a comment on this video. Give it a thumbs up, guys, if you're watching it as well. If you want me to look at the altcoin chart, please just drop a comment on the video here. But the other chart to look at is ETH BTC. And again, we have broken to the downside on this particular chart. And that trend that we were watching here over the past 8 to 9 months, if I go back into the daily here, we obviously found a local bottom for Ethereum versus Bitcoin in April of 2025. We've had substantial outperformance of Ethereum versus Bitcoin over the past 8 months or so. We have had 80% outperformance of ETH versus Bitcoin. But what I've been watching is this uptrend that has remained intact has unfortunately broken to the downside here, as you can see. And we were looking at an inflection point for a decision on ETH versus BTC here by the first week in February. Unfortunately, it's looking like that's breaking to the downside. The positive I'm drawing from this is we are seeming to hold this particular level of support, at least for the moment, which goes all the way back here to August of 2025. And so maybe we can hold that and make a push to try retest this longer term downtrend. That longer term downtrend, if we zoom out on the weekly here, going all the way back to the highs from 2022 for that ETH versus Bitcoin ratio chart. And you can see that on dozens of occasions here over the past 4 years or so, we have not managed to break out of this downtrend. And so I was thinking maybe this is the moment because we're right back up retesting it here. And I do think we eventually will get there. It's just a matter of maybe is now too soon to see that move happen, or do we get a move up here in the next few weeks or the next couple of months to see Ethereum retesting that long-term downtrend, breaking out? That would be obviously fantastic for alt across the board. You would see substantial outperformance, and we would see Bitcoin dominance breaking to the downside. And then obviously that would be good for the alt market. But for right now, it is not looking the most positive with a break to the downside on the structure of ETH versus BTC. I can see a couple of people requesting Caspa, Canton, and Ondo. So let's take a quick look at those charts. Again, because alts are getting a substantial pullback here, it is looking a little bit rough for what's happening on these charts. Caspa back here at the 3.7 cents level. I think this area is pretty critical for us to hold, given that it has served as pretty strong support going all the way back to this period here in 2023. I would prefer to see this holding. I would prefer to see us getting a bounce. You can see that we've been getting rejected from this more local downtrend that goes back to May of 2025. And so just simple support and resistance here, guys. If we're going to break here below 3.5 cents, I think you're going to see us having to retest something a little bit closer to 3.25 cents. And I would prefer not to see that. But unless Bitcoin can make a move back up, you would have to think that would be the short-term fate for Caspa. If we look at Ondo, we're back at 31 cents here. We're breaking below key support levels on the Ondo chart right now as well. Again, key support going all the way back to 2024 and Q1 in February. And so given that we're breaking lower here, it's difficult to see us getting a bigger move to the upside unless we see Bitcoin moving higher as well. Remember, Ondo did have a very large unlock event happen in the past couple of weeks, which is obviously increasing of about 50% plus the circulating supply of Ondo. And so that, I think, is having an effect on price action here. You need to have substantial buy pressure on an asset like that when you have a 50% increase in the circulating supply. And so if we're going to break this level for Ondo, again, just very, very simply, you would have to think we're coming down to test this area around the 28 cents zone. And that would be the next major level of support, just going back to this chart from January of 2024. Let's take a look at Canton. We have CC on the chart here for the Canton network. And if we look at CC USDT, we did have some nice price action to the upside here. Looks like a cup and handle formation. I've been talking about this with some clients lately. If we draw in a very crude and simple cup and handle here on the chart, you can see we have large cup handle formation, break out to the upside, breaking above this level, and we're continuing to move higher. So there are still outliers in the market, guys. We know Bitcoin is pulling back here, but the likes of Canton and even Hyperliquid has had a phenomenal week here. I know we're looking at price action back at $31, having gone up to 34. But if we look at the most recent weekly candle, we've still had a 30% gain for the Hyperliquid token here on the weekly candle, a 40% gain, in fact, over the past 6 or 7 days. So all is not terrible. I know it's painful to see certain alts pulling back even harder than Bitcoin, but there are outliers. There is money to be made. And you can see what's happening here with the likes of Canton token as well as Hyperliquid. So AI that links to real world assets. I see someone commenting that in the comments here. Yeah, Ondo is the main token linking to real world assets. I'm not sure if there's much of an AI stance for Ondo, to be honest, but they do have Ondo Global Markets, tokenization of stocks on chain. I think when you're looking at AI tokens representing real world assets, the first one that comes to mind is Resi subnet on the BitTensor network. And if I jump over to this tab here and just share Resi, again, if you're not familiar with BitTensor subnets, have a free to have a look across my channel. There's a whole bunch of videos, and I interviewed the founder of Resi as well, so you can check that out. But ultimately, Resi is tokenizing real estate on the blockchain using the BitTensor Tau network as an AI incentive layer. And again, Resi has had some pretty good price performance here over the past few months, outperforming Tau. Let's see, on a percentage basis, if we look from, even just since September last year, it's still up about 123% versus Tau. And again, if you're not familiar with alpha tokens, and if you've no idea what I'm talking about here with Resi, please go look at the other Tau related videos on my channel. Chris, I will take a quick look at Solana. That's a good suggestion. Looking at Solana, we're back at $117. Again, similar to Ethereum here, we are losing a critical level of support, or we are about to if we get a move lower than 117. We can see here we're right at that level. And I'm drawing this in because we do have good support around this $118 area from when we came down here. We wicked pretty close to it in November. We found support here a few times in December. We wicked down here again just about a week ago. So we're critically testing this level of support. And if we're going to break that level, you would have to think we are going to come down to retest these lows from Q1, Q2, when we had this drawdown into April, which is closer to that $100 to $95 area. So definitely a nice area to scoop up some Solana if we do have to come that low. Again, all eyes on Bitcoin for the close of the weekly candle by the time we get to Sunday evening. So keep an eye on that, guys. I'm just realizing I was sharing the wrong screen when I was talking about the Solana chart there. Let me jump back to it. But this critical level is what I was referring to, where we wicked and came down to in December a couple of times. We wicked close to it in November. And if we're going to break lower, you'd have to think, something close to 110 and then $100 would be on the cards in terms of support levels. So keep an eye on that. Definitely a nice area if you want to scoop some Solana into, the 2-digit zone. If we get to $99, not a bad buying price, not financial advice. Always do your own research, guys. But that is a quick roundup. I wanted to take a look at the charts. I wanted to give an update on what I'm seeing and what's happening. There will be more videos dropping on the channel here in the next few days. As always, let me know if there's any specific content you guys want to see more of. Lots more BitTensor Tau content coming as well. So keep me posted on what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of, any specific deep dives, any subnets, anything in particular. Let me know and we'll make more videos soon. So I appreciate everyone jumping on live here. Appreciate the interaction, guys. Please smash a thumbs up on the video if you got some enjoyment out of it. I'm going to keep doing more lives on the channel, bringing more content. And so we will keep the videos coming. Tau Backroom is saying, in my view, after Tau will sweep the sell side, we are going back up. Yep, Tau has been very much range bound in this area for the past year, really. But I do think there's lots of good potential upside with BitTensor, and we can dive into more of that on future videos. So I appreciate everyone joining, guys. Quick update video, quick live. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch it. Smash the thumbs up button.